Hi, everybody. Welcome to the last day of our November Culturama. And we're going to be coming back and doing more throughout the year. So in the past, this has always been a bittersweet day as we look for a full year away for the next Culturama. But that's not what's happening this time. We're going to keep going. We're also going to continue putting Culturama on our Culturama community page, which is, let me show you. Oh, I've got to get off Facebook. Hold on a second. Which is here. And I've already got up my notes for this lecture. I'll put my video up after we've finished recording. But there are, you can follow us over here to know what's going on and to be a part of future events where we'll put information on this page, and we'll expand this page as we go on. Okay, so today we're talking about publishing, and after a month of Culturama, you likely have things to publish. We do have publishers in the room who are looking for work from you, including Francesca Terzano, who publishes a magazine called Literary Alchemy. And oh yes, I can. It's a very good point. Take a moment to do that. Oh, thank you very much for doing that, Amber. And Francesca is looking for people specifically from this group to do things. She's got a theme now that has, I think the theme is anything to do with the pandemic. Is that correct, Francesca?
Anything you've written during the stay-at-home order. And
okay.
I'll share more stuff once you're done with your introduction and spiel.
Okay. And so I'm going to go through, and in today's class, I'm going to answer several questions. This is going to be in parts nuts and bolts, but in part also how in the world do we go forward with this? How do you structure a career, even if it's just a hobby within publishing? And we're going to answer these questions. Why is magical thinking? I just put them in the chat. Why is magical thinking dangerous when it comes to publishing? What does realistic mean? Why are goals important? How should someone contact a publisher? What tools are there for the writer? What is the importance of literary community and mentorship, and why write a book review? And I'm going to try to answer each one of these fairly quickly. We'll have a couple of exercises, but get through them as quickly as we can so that if you have questions. Note too that Lloyd and I are always open for you to reach out to us. We're creative writing specialists, and part of our specialty is knowing where to have you send your work. And so we've had hundreds and hundreds of students come and be published after they've contacted us, just because we know where to send you. Okay. So I want to talk first about why publish. And that's a question that a lot of people ask themselves, and then a lot of people in your life will act as though this is an act of pure vanity. It's not. And sometimes people in your life will tear you down. That is them dealing with their stuff. That has nothing to do with you. This is in no way an act of vanity. The reason I think it's important for people to publish is that the world is a difficult place to live in. And knowing that you're not alone makes the world a little bit easier. And one of the ways we can feel less alone is when we read somebody who's gone through something that we've gone through, right? And so we could say, well, everything's been written, but no, it hasn't. The conditions have changed, and there is a need for people in the 21st century to write 21st century things, so that when I read something by Jonathan, I feel less alone. Also, if you look at Jonathan, he in many ways is different than me. He's much younger than me, for example, and that helps to broaden my horizons. It helps me to see things. I have the wisdom of the old, and many of you have the wisdom of the young, right? And both perspectives are necessary to be seen, and that's why to publish. Mostly, what I deal with is not a publication that makes much money. That's really not the reason to do this. It's to help to further human understanding and to create a community in which it's more possible to live. Okay, so now that's number one. Number two, the problem that a lot of people have with publishing is they engage in what's called magical thinking. And this is promoted in the 1950s with, you'd have sort of this narrative of the movie starlet who's hanging out in a drugstore and somebody walks in and says, she's got it. Let's hire her right now, right? And she's whisked away to fame and fortune. Well, the concept of being discovered is nonsense. And only in the arts do we engage in this sort of magical thinking. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be, one of my places I wanted to go was Mount SAC. I saw myself as going either to Mount SAC or to Cal State something or other or whatever. So I engaged in, I engaged in certain programs. I said, I've got to do X and Y and Z in order to get there. But what a lot of people will do is they'll say, I just want people to read my writing. I just want to get out of there. That is the most, I want my writing to get out there. That is the most unrealistic, worst way of approaching writing ever. Let me put it another way. Imagine you're a doctor. So and you say something like, I really don't care who I work on. I just want to go out in the street and I want to cut people up and suture them back up and, remove a leg here and do doctor shit. Well, no, of course that's never going to happen in that way, right? Somebody will see me in a street corner and they'll see me removing somebody's leg and they'll say, that guy's got it. He's discovered, right? That just doesn't work that way. And neither does it in writing. The idea of being discovered is magical thinking. And it doesn't work. What you need to do is first just figure out what your goal is and then do the steps that it takes to get there in the same way you would with any profession. We've been talking about the art, we've been talking about the craft. This is the profession of writing. The profession of writing needs to be treated like a profession. Now, it's okay if what you want out of writing is for it to be a hobby and get the occasional thing published too. That's great too, right? I'm not saying that everyone has to have this dream where they're going to be the professional, this is everything I do. No, there's different types of writers. But if you want to publish this idea that I'm just going to kind of get it out there and somebody's going to see it and that doesn't work. So the first thing you do is we're going to think about today is figure out a goal, a very specific goal. Why this is important is if you don't have a goal, when you start to publish, it's not going to feel real. It's like, I said before, I just wanted people to read my stuff, but not these people. I really meant, and it becomes a ever retreating, impossible to achieve sort of thing. Whereas if you have a goal and say, I want to do this eventually, you can see yourself moving toward that. Just like when I said, okay, I want to teach professionally. I want to teach. That's what I want to do. I could see myself moving towards it. Before I can teach English 1A, I should probably take English 1A. Okay, I took English 1A. And now I know the next step is English 1C. And I can see progress as I'm going along. And then I'm done with my bachelor's degree. Now I know I need to get into a certain kind of master's program, et cetera, et cetera. It might be far off, but if you don't set that goal, you don't know the small things you have to do to get to that goal. Also, setting a goal helps you to understand who you are and what brings value to you. There's a difference between these two things. What is necessary to you and what's merely interesting. What's necessary is that thing that feeds your soul, right? This is the thing I want. This is the thing that changes me. What's merely interesting is like, okay, well, I'm kind of interested in that. And I made that error again and again and again when I was first starting out. And one of those was like, I was a new teacher. I thought, well, this is interesting, not thinking about what I actually wanted in 20, 30, 40 years. And I think, well, I see this program at Cal Poly where you can get a master's degree in history. Let's do that. Well, history is kind of interesting to me, but it's not necessary. And the truth was that going after that thing was kind of interesting, was me running from my fears, right? My fears being of success or failure. And so I was running from that thing by distracting myself. I wish somebody sat me down and said, what actually brings meaning to your life? So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about something that seems far away from you. Now, if it's me, I'm not going to do a goal 40 years from now. Why? Because, well, 40 years from now, I'm hoping to be able to gum some stewed carrots and kind of sit in the nursing home and watch the ducks. That's the big goal for 40. Maybe 25 years, I can have a goal for that. But if you're one of our younger people, yeah, 40 years, that's a good goal. Think of something that's kind of far away. And I want you to choose a goal that feels unrealistic, but it's also really specific. The one I've chosen for myself, and it took me a long time to figure this out, was California Poet Laureate. I don't think it's going to happen, right? In fact, I don't really think it should happen. I think it should be a person of color who becomes a Poet Laureate. But what that did was gave me two things. It made me understand what was necessary for my life. If I do those things to become the California Poet Laureate, all those things I need to do, I will have had a satisfying life and a satisfying career, right? And what it made me realize is I like to work with people. I like to be a teacher, right? That's part of the Poet Laureate thing. I also like to write. Both those things feed me, right? Whether or not I actually achieve it is meaningless, but I can do all those things that get me to there. That's why I realized I wanted to be Sequoia and Kings Canyon Poet Laureate. Great, right? That's I think doing that thing really gave my life a lot more meaning. Whether or not at least the other thing, this is not important. So I'd like you just to take 3 minutes. We're going to do a thought experiment. I want it to be as specific and unrealistic as you could possibly get for your own life. Don't write somebody else's life. So I'll give you 3 minutes.
Wait, so then so we're writing like
your life goals for writing.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that might be a Nobel Prize. Most people, it's not a Nobel Prize. It might be you want a four book deal for a fantasy novel. Great. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, wherever you are, finish up. Okay, what I just did is I asked you to find what brings ultimate meaning and purpose to your life and can create both pleasure and joy. And I gave you 3 minutes to do it. It's obviously it's not done, right? This is going to take you a while. This is maybe a good beginning for it. It takes a long time to do that. I always think of freshmen starting college because I work with a lot of college freshmen, and they are asked to figure out the rest of their lives by the time they're 19. It's like, oh my God, it's a lot to ask somebody to do, or at least they feel like they're being asked that. 3 minutes obviously isn't working, but this is a good place to start. It took me a long time to get to California Poet Laureate. Why not United States Poet Laureate? I don't like the politics, and I don't want to engage the politics that way. There's a lot that I want to do in California in terms of opening up the national parks, right? So it took me a long time to figure out what that thing was and why that thing was. What brings absolute meaning to me in a sort of Viktor Frankl sort of way. I'm going to ask some people, I don't want everybody's answer here. We're just going to get some examples. I'm going to ask some people who've done this before what kind of answers they have, because there's a lot of people here who've worked with me for a long time. And then I'm going to ask some other people who've never done this before to give an answer. And I'm probably going to tell them that it's too vague. It's not possible. For example, changing the world through my writing is not possible because it's too vague. You absolutely will change the world through your writing, but it's not possible for you to see yourself as having done it, right? It needs to be something that you can actually, it's tangible, you can get to. So I'm going to start with people I think have already done this. Maybe Lloyd. Lloyd, did you have a good answer for this, Lloyd?
I've got 3 because I recently did this again with my therapist when I turned 40. He asked me what I want to accomplish in the next 10 years in terms of my career. I said I want to publish my first full poetry collection, my first graphic novel, and my first actual novel. So that's my goal for the next 10 years.
Which is an attainable goal.
Mm-hmm.
I might make it even a little more specific. Do you want that book with like vintage paperbacks, or would you prefer to have it in Pelican pieces?
Yes, no, absolutely, yeah. I want the novel with the novel and the graphic novel with both major publishers.
Okay, that's great. And now, see, Lloyd, there are certain steps that Lloyd has to take in order to get there. It's not enough for Lloyd to have a good novel, probably. Lloyd has to do things like get himself into major short stories into major magazines. He needs to, before he can do that, probably second-tier magazines, right? He's got a whole bunch of steps set up for himself because of this. And I think, Francesca, you probably have a pretty good answer to this.
Wait, do you want my answer? Do you want the things I listed?
I want your answer.
I'm just going to say the things I listed. 3-book deal for my sci-fi series, New York Times bestseller, PhD, possibly.
Okay, and now those are things that she has listed things that bring meaning to her. I might choose the publisher, like Tor would be a great publisher, or Del Rey, something like that. And that possibly with your PhD, that's something to think about. Why in the world did you say possibly? I say this having started and dropped out of a big PhD program.
I say this as someone who's going to be at a crossroad next spring, who can either work on my PhD application or work on my novel to finally be published.
Yeah. So that's a good project to think about. What is that bring you meaning? Okay, so let me ask somebody who's never done this before. Would you like to volunteer? Would anybody be interested in volunteering? Yeah, Marianne.
Sure. Okay. You said shoot for the stars, right? Or
Absolutely.
big one. Okay. Nobel laureate of the Chicano experience. Biography of Los Lobos under my belt. World War II biopic from my book on my family. And regular contributions to the New Yorker and literary journals.
Fantastic. That is a perfectly reasonable and logical and realistic goal. All of those. I can actually help you with part of that.
Marianne, did you go to the keynote last night?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's a good contact to have for a memoir.
Yeah. Okay.
And Amber wanted to go as well, okay. And Alessandra.
Marianne, I've got a friend. Do you know Grant Heyer?
No.
He writes the liner notes for Los Lobos. He's a friend of mine. He's one of our Culturama people. So I know they would like to have the biography written, so I can get you in touch there. Amber, would you mind sharing?
Yeah.
We're going to do these 3: Amber, Alessandra, Carol.
Okay, the first goal I wrote, this like I wrote actually years ago, was to write and publish different genres for different age groups. And then over time, I realized how vague that was. So I kind of changed it to more where I want to dedicate books to my son as he grows up. So like right now, since he's about 3, I'm trying to make a children's book about a parent with depression because that's what I have. And I'm hoping as he gets older, I can expand in like different, hopefully genres that I just want really dedicate to him. And if other people like enjoy it, I would love that. But I guess my goal is really just for him to enjoy it.
It's really interesting. It's the same project that one of our professors on campus is doing, Robert Peluso. He's writing novels about his and his daughter's relationship in different ways, but they're like sci-fi or something. They won't follow.
He's my teacher right now for
Oh, let's see.
fiction for creative writing.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So Robert.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to cut it off with Carol though. Alessandra.
I wrote unrealistic goals.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a second. I love the unrealistic. Tell me what they are.
I put known as the next Meredith Monk in terms of avant-garde sound poetry combined with film. Seasonal every winter teacher of creative writing in Miami-Dade County Community College. And then full-time faculty at a California community college.
Okay, none of those things are unrealistic in any way. I love Marianne's response. She said Nobel laureate for the Chicano experience. Now it's really important that she said the Chicano experience because that is what the Nobel Prize is about. It's both about great writing, but also about social change, right? And she's talking about social change. Yours seem very not unrealistic to me at all. Right, you're talking. Well, you named a poet. I'm actually not familiar with that poet, but that poet did that, right? You can do that too. What one person can do, another person can do. Absolutely. Carol.
Well, I've only been writing poetry for maybe a month or so.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. And so my goals are to write every day, sharpen my skills doing workshops and learning through programs like this, publishing in various magazines. I'd also like the read aloud experience of reading my poetry aloud and having other people share it that way, and then publishing in at least 3 publications.
Okay.
Other than the magazines that I mentioned before.
Okay, that's great. And I'm going to give you a more specific goal to read at a venue called Beyond Baroque, which is in Santa Monica. And all of the big LA poets will go and read there. It's one of those markers of success. And so let's make that a 5-10 year goal. You can do it in 5. You have good work. You have good insight. Okay, so I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to stop there. Let's go with Jonathan.
I think one of my goals, after talking to Chandra's first workshop yesterday about like starting a memoir and where do you want to go, I guess because something that I've been thinking about doing is kind of starting like a collection of short stories from like people of color who like work in mental health or who, I guess in a sense, like act as switchboards for the family that like for their family, like older generations that don't necessarily know how to communicate what they're going through. And it's just like an advice tip or like an advice little column, just like, hey, this is what I've gone through my family. And like, although it's like a little bit harmful, like this is kind of how we resolved it. And just moving forward, like adding more stories and tips for people who may be in similar situations where they don't know how to like, just like that generational divide between families and I'm so sorry, this is loud. That generational divide between families of like people who want to acknowledge mental health and then like their parents who don't really know where to start.
That's great. I think there's a number of ways to go there, and there are a lot of publishers out there that would help you. Yeah, I think that's an amazing project. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good publisher for you. The one that jumps out immediately, and then I rejected it, was Red Hen Press. But I'm gonna put more thought into like where you should go with that. So that's great. I think those are definitely good. I would think a column in a magazine like the LA. What is it? The LA. What's the one that's? I don't know. I'll get back to you on that. Something that a lot of people are saying, because you want this spread far and wide, right? Okay, so these are really great goals, right? The more specific, the better. The more unrealistic, the better. Now, here's the problem with the word realistic. It's all often code for something else. I had a student come to me a few years ago and say, well, is it really realistic for me to think that I could be a professional writer? It's like, first of all, of course it is. And second of all, behind that question lurks so much self-doubt, possibly abuse, possibly, he was a person of color, possibly racism, right? There's a lot that's lurking behind that question. You could be a professional writer as long as you treat it like a profession, right? Certainly he could do this. A lot of people who are professional writers, and that might mean fiction writer, it might mean tech writer, it might mean a lot of things, as long as you're willing to go down that road and do the things that you need to do. Often realistic becomes really a discussion of your self-doubts and what people have put upon you and past abuse, right? These are none of these are unrealistic goals. Think of the people who have won the Nobel Prize. These are people who are coming from places of profound poverty, often profoundly bad educations, and they are able to do it. It's just a matter of being able to see yourself in terms of in the way that other people see you, as opposed to the way you see yourself. I got a question here. What do you recommend we do to narrow down our goals when we have too many of them or don't know how to prioritize them? I think that's soul searching, and figuring out what it is that matters to you now, and also know that your goals are going to change. So if I stuck with I'd be very disappointed right now if I had stuck with my goals when I was 14, because I really wanted to be Eddie Van Halen. And first of all, it'd be very difficult for me to be another human being. And then second of all, like, really, kid, Eddie Van Halen, you can't choose like somebody who's good. I mean, I know he can like play a lot of notes all at once.
Dude, he
but
just passed away. Be nice.
no, that's true. He was one of my heroes at one point. I feel like I have some, like, yeah, there's got to be more out of life. And as I grew, I changed goals. I assume that I'm going to change goals again as I get older. It's like, oh, wow, that was kind of a goofy goal that you had, Poet Laureate. Really? Do you want to be that? That's fine. But how do you narrow those things down? I came to a point in my college career when I had to decide whether I wanted to be a forest ranger or whether I wanted to be I wanted to teach English. And what I chose was that thing that I couldn't not do. Right? I cannot live in the forest. That's fine. I spent a lot of time in the forest. I spent my entire summers in the forest, wandering through and doing that sort of thing. But I can't not do this. I would be very depressed if I were not teaching English and writing. It'd be very, very difficult for me to get through a day. Life would seem unnecessary. A really good place to figure this out is by reading maybe 12 times a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which I make my students do. And this is a person who lived through the Holocaust and had to make those kinds of decisions. Right? It's a really interesting book. But also, I think there are certain times in our lives when we do have a lot of goals, and they're varying. If you're nearing the end of your college career, suddenly that happens, right? When you graduate, you can often go through a core life crisis, which is I don't know what's next, right? I've had purpose every single day of my life, and now I don't know what's next. And at those points, it feels like just if I had anything, it would be better than this. It's good to prep for that, to figure out what it is that anything is, what it is that you want. Okay, let's think about another question. Okay, so why are goals important? How should someone contact a publisher? Okay, so, there's another question. Sure. How does one, no, we've gone through the sort of spiritual, mental, emotional, psychological aspects. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts. How does someone contact a publisher? Well, it's based a little bit upon the way that we used to. Yeah, absolutely. It's based a little bit on the way that we used to contact publishers, which was through the USPS mail. We had a way of writing letters then that has kind of translated into now. So let me tell you how we used to write letters when we had USPS mail. You get what was called a self-addressed stamped envelope. And there's still a couple of publishers who do it this way. And that's just you send them a packet with your story and what's called a cover letter. And the cover letter is composed of different things. By the way, if you miss something, I put all of the notes onto the Culturama community page. You're going to write a letter, and you follow basic business letter form. And I know that addressing letters not taught anymore because you almost never do it. But what that means is your name on top with your address written properly. If you don't know how to do it properly, don't worry. You can find it all over the internet. Your email address, the date, and then their name and address and email contacts, right? Followed by either to whom it may concern, that's kind of if it doesn't work, or dear whoever it is. Now, if, for example, your publisher is Francesca Terzano, remember that sexism is a thing and you should not engage in it. So do not say, dear Francesca, any more than you would refer to me as John. No Mrs. For the love of God, no Miss. MS, Ms. Right? That's the proper way to address a professional person, unless that person has a title like doctor or professor, which she does. She's a professor. And Francesca, you were going to say something. I didn't give you a chance.
I was just going to say, especially don't do that when the publisher's a known feminist.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. But I think just treating people with respect is the first thing. Absolutely. Okay. So you're going to say, dear whomever. Dear has always seemed like a really weird way to address another human being that you don't know. But, that is the professional standard right now. And then you're going to have 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph, possibly 4, usually 3 actually, but possibly 4. The first paragraph is how you know that person, right? So you can write to Tom Thomas or Francesca Terzano and say, we met at Culturama 2020, right? Tom Thomas is less open to outside writers, but every once in a while he'll have a call for submissions. You should check Redshift. More often he asks you for that. I would not send to Tom Thomas unless he either had open or he asked me, right? But you could say, we met here, we talked about this, we had this kind of conversation, that kind of thing. Or if I suggest that you write to a publisher, dear, what's that guy's name? David Caddy, Tears in the Fence, John Brantingham suggested that I contact you because he felt your work was good. That doesn't get you an automatic publication. What that gets you is a little bit of a closer look and maybe a more personalized response, right? They're not going to accept you unless you are right for their magazine or publisher, but they'll say, oh, you know what? I don't think this really works. Why don't you send this to Frogmore Papers? And then you say, dear Frogmore Papers, David Caddy suggested I send that to you, et cetera, et cetera. I say Frogmore Papers because David Caddy did that for me one time, right? It was really nice of him. So most of the time you don't have that first thing. The second paragraph is content. And that's what am I sending you, right? So you want to make sure that you're sending the person the right sort of thing. So when I was 17, 18 years old, I started sending stuff out and I was writing mostly fantasy novels. And so I said, well, I really want I'm putting in all this work. I wanted to go big. So I sent my fantasy novels to the New Yorker magazine, which in retrospect seems like a mistake, right? Because even if that had been the world's best fantasy story as opposed to novel, they still wouldn't have published it because they publish a certain type of thing, right? And there's no problem with that. When I buy the New Yorker, I want to read the New Yorker stories. I don't want to be suddenly surprised by any more than if I'm reading Runners Daily or whatever, and they have a thing about handball. It's like, wait a second, I wanted to read about runners. So figure out who that is. And then this paragraph it's fairly short. You if it's a story, you give them character, desire, conflict. My short story, The Evil Nuns, is about a nun who wants to sell cocaine, but her friend tries to stop her. Right, that's it. Just avoiding any sort of problem. Avoid cliches. The biggest cliche in this sentence, this paragraph, is if you want to know what happens next, read the rest of the story. Love of God, don't do that. Give them the entire story, right? Give them the ending, if it's appropriate, right? Another cliche to avoid is don't tell them it's copyrighted. Any professional, any writer worth his or her salt knows that it's character, desire, conflict. Absolutely knows that it's copyrighted. The moment you type it into your thing, it's copyrighted. People will. The Copyright Office tells you that basically getting a copyright is a waste of your time and money. Right? It's in your computer. It's time stamped. There have been cases when people have plagiarized, but it's few and far between. Usually, if there's no money to be sued for anyway, but if there is, you can make a lot of money. Right? Coming to America, I think, is a famous example of somebody whose career was made by Eddie Murphy's plagiarism. But it's pretty few and far between. The worst I've ever gotten is the Regents exam. There was a guy named John Brantingham who was a famous preacher, and he died. And so the Regents exam for New York took one of my poems, and they used it it was really wonderful. You had to compare me to Isaac Asimov. But they used those two people because they thought that we both were dead. And so I contacted them and said, I'm not dead, and you need to pay me for this. And they said, we don't really feel like it. And so they didn't pay me for it. But I was credited, which was fine. And I could have sued, but for what, $200? There's no. Mostly that kind of thing doesn't happen. This is one instance in a career of 30 years so far, right? It's just not a thing. So don't worry about that copyright thing. Okay, so we've got contact, we have content, then we're going to have the biography section. 1 or 2 sentences proving that you are a professional in some way. Now, if you've got publications, that's great. If you don't have publications, that's great too, right? So chances are what you're writing about is something that you know about, right? Even if it's science fiction. So you can say, well, I'm influenced by the writings of Kim Stanley Robinson, right? You can't possibly know about future spaceships because they don't exist. Or maybe you are an engineer, right? And you have this. Or maybe you're Lloyd and you're writing a collection about being a Filipino. Says, well, I'm a Filipino American. I've been living here. I don't have any publications. That's not true for Lloyd, but let's imagine. And these are based on the experiences that I've had. Or me, imagine I don't have publications, but I do live in a van in the forest for 2 or 3 months a year. And so I'm pretty familiar with what the forest is like. Totally off contact. It's great. I'm totally off grid during that time. And so I can, that's a compelling and interesting story, and it's going to work, right? Don't tell anybody that you're an amateur, because you're not. Shouldn't be too long, maybe a couple of sentences. Lloyd, how long is your bio?
I try to keep it less than 50 words.
Yeah, that's a really good mark. So if you have some publications, it's fine, but you also don't want to put your obituary down there. It's just something to entice people. And it gets turned into your about the author section. And the last paragraph is just a quick closing. I always say thank you very much for taking the time to read my work. Bonnie Hearn-Hill says not to do that. She doesn't like to thank people for just doing their jobs. That's just a philosophical thing. She says something like, I hope you enjoy it, kind of thing. Just be professional and polite. That's really the best way of going out. Professionalism is what you want here. Just let people know that you are a serious person and that you're doing serious work. You might see yourself as not being a serious person doing serious work. That's between you and you, right? If you present yourself as a professional, however, people will accept you as a professional. Okay. What tools are there for the writers? That is the next section. There's a lot out there to help you do things. Now, one of the hardest things to do is to find places to publish you. Most of the magazines in the world are not online. One that I use that's $5 a month, and it's a very good source, is what's called duotrope.com. I'm going to start with here, not because this is what you should start with, and I put it in the chat, but just to demonstrate something for you. Going to my Duotrope page. Once you start writing a lot, you really should get a Duotrope account. It's $5 a month. I know that Lloyd gets it just for certain months in the year when he knows he's going to send stuff out. I always have it because I like to send stuff out a lot. And I'm going to go to the search function here. Oh, am I not signed in? Okay, I've got to log in. I used to hate the sound of that train. Now I love it. Okay, so, and you can see this is one way of doing it. It's just looking at this. I want to demonstrate something. I'm just going to, somebody give me choose a letter of the alphabet. Dan, give me a letter of the alphabet.
How about W?
W, okay. W is a fairly uncommon letter of the alphabet to begin a word with. These are all the magazines and book publishers that start with W. 2 sides of the page. There are a lot of freaking magazines and book publishers out there. And what this is a map. It's what Writer's Digest was trying to be, or I'm sorry, Writer's Market was trying to be. Writer's Market never really worked very well because you could never have this many things in it. But you can see how many just in the W's there are. And this just links you to their page. So I'm trying to find. So this is Wales Haiku Journal. This is for haikus in Wales. You can go to the publication. I'm guessing they do people outside of Wales as well. And it takes you right to their magazine. And then you're going to look for this up here. It says submit, and it gives you their submission page. What that gives you are the rules and how to send that to. Read this very, very carefully. They probably won't want your entire letter. They're probably going to want parts of it. Read this carefully. Make sure you follow it carefully. Right? Exactly what they're looking for. They put the stuff, that information there for a reason. Right? It's really, really specific. So Duotrope is great. I might not start there though. There are others that are good too. That's not the one. That's not the one. New Pages is great. This tends to be kind of higher level, more difficult to get into magazines. Maybe tier 2 and tier 1 magazines, things you're going to find in Barnes and Noble, but they have other things too. And you can see there's cults. You can go to here and that gives you, oh, I'm already there. Oh, no. Okay, so there it is. These are people who are actually looking for writers right now. It gives you book reviews, gives you magazine reviews, gives you all sorts of things. You use this obviously a little bit different than Duotrope. This is for more timely things, right? So I love Willow Springs magazine. It's great. And it's okay. So the deadline is rolling, which means you can always send it to them. It's just people are saying, well, now's when we want to read. Send us some stuff. In the chat. Okay, yeah. Here's another one. This is Submittable. You are going to be on Submittable no matter what you want to do. It's the way most people submit, or most magazines accept submissions. It's also the reason I don't give up Facebook, because I just signed up through Facebook. You get almost automatic thing. It doesn't cost you anything. And then you can take a look at I'm going to go to my Submittable. I've been signed out. Okay, so I'll sign in. Had it open too long. Okay, and I haven't done anything for a little while, so it's got a lot of things. You can see how most of what I have is withdrawn because I submitted this to 4 or 5 different magazines. One of them picked it up and I withdrew. Right, so it mostly looks negative, but it's not. And then you can go to the Discover section, and it's got some stuff. It's different than Duotrope, but in some ways better, some ways worse. This is things that are coming up, so you can take a look at where you want to submit and each one of these is looking for people. Novelette and Flash Prize. That's great. That's one that I'd want to do, but it ends in 4 hours, so I can't submit to that. Okay, but this is submittable is really good. Oh, by the way, if you're furiously writing all this down, I've got this and all the links to all of these on our webpage. Here's one. Oh, that's the same one. No, that's different. Where is it? Okay, this is the one I want. This one I absolutely love. This person is just, as far as I am concerned, this person's a saint. She has been running. She ran this for years as a Yahoo listserv, and then that stopped being a thing. So she put it up as a blogger. But people just send her stuff for the magazines, for their magazines. We're looking for submissions right now, and she just puts them up. It's free for everyone. She just does it. The only thing, every once in a while, she'll ask you to donate $5 or $10 to a cancer charity that she's interested in, and you can do it or not. I always do it because I just feel so grateful to her. I've gotten, I don't know how many short story publications and poetry publications out of this, and at least 2 of my books have come from this. Right, people I never would have known about, thought about. You can see it's all different types of things. They're fantastic. Oh, Tahoma's great. Yeah. Okay, so you can say like, and you just keep scrolling down, and suddenly you're getting all this great stuff. And this stuff will be both very, very difficult to get into, but mixed with people who are starting off with their first magazine. And that's a little bit more of a prize. However, no matter who you're sending to, you should never say, well, this story that I'm sending out is kind of crappy, so maybe I'll target a lesser magazine. Don't think that way, right? Don't send out your crap. Those people working at those startup magazines are putting passion into that. They care about that. If all they get is crap, they'll just say, okay, well, I'm just not going to publish this month. I want something of value. And then the last one is Poets and Writers. Poets and Writers has a lot of really great information in here, including calls for things, prizes. I think I'm on the prize page right now. Yeah, it looks like it. But they'll have a lot of information for you. So, okay. So that's the nuts and bolts, and we're almost at the point where we're going to ask questions. So if you have them, keep them on. The second to last one is, what is the importance of a literary community with mentorship? Well, mentorship is a really important thing, because the hardest thing to know is where to send your story, or your poem. But Lloyd and I have been studying this for 30, 40 years, and we know a lot of the markets. We can help you, rather than you taking 10 years like it took me. I was really frustrated with some of my early writing after the fact, or some of my early mentorship, because I realized they could have told me exactly where to send my things, and they just didn't. It would have taken them 5 seconds, and it instead took me 10 years, right? I don't want anybody to have to go through that. Please come through Lloyd and me. Also, the more you publish, the better we look. And so it's really not just a benevolent act on our part. I can go to my department and say, 100 of our writers were published this semester. And what, I don't really go to my department. What I do is I go to my dean and I say, can you give us more money for our next program? And he's like, okay, well, I can justify the more money that way. So please, please, please work through me and work through Lloyd. My mentor, it's hard for me to have a mentor in Los Angeles who is like the traditional idea of a mentor, because everybody kind of sees me as dad. And so, but I also, a lot of my mentors are younger than myself. So if I start writing sci-fi, which I might, I enjoy the genre very much, I will go to my old student, Scott, who's become a sort of expert in science fiction, right? Mentors don't have to be older than you, and sometimes they're less experienced. They've got their heartbeat on something. That's also why you want to have a community, right? So you can keep each other focused, not only in terms of publishing, but also in terms of writing. It's really easy to give up if you don't have a community. I think, well, I'm just writing this for myself. I don't think it's any good, right? A famous example, Stephen King was writing the novel Carrie. Fantastic novel, threw it away. He didn't have any friends who were helping. His wife's like, no, she fished it out of the garbage. Luckily, part of his community lived in his house. Said, it's Carrie. It's a good novel, right? And that, of course, was his breakthrough novel. And thank God he didn't have that thrown away. That's a great novel. And he's given us great books. He's also given us terrible books. He gave us Maximum Overdrive. but he gave us Misery, which was fantastic, right? Okay, so that's a lot of me talking. Oh yeah, Robert Peluso's great. Okay, so Diana Gonzalez says, I want to work in the film industry as a writer, but I'm told that I don't have the money or connections to do it. Where can I possibly start? I plan to major in PR. I would, through in the film industry, I'm going to say this, I want you to follow up first with Robert Peluso, but second, more importantly, with our film department. But my guess is the best way to do that is through internships. And that's true too if you want to be a professional editor in the book writing. Those internships get you the kind of connections that you can get. What I don't do is I don't listen to anybody outside the field, and I don't listen to any one voice within the field, right? So that and very often, just in my life in general, getting through the university, I take no as a really interesting point of view as opposed to a definitive answer, right? If I'm going for a scholarship and somebody says, no, you can't do that. It's like, well, that's an interesting point of view. Then I'm going to go talk to the next person, right? And the next person, and the next person, and the next person. Those who work like that generally have good success. Yeah, absolutely. But I want to preface what I just said with well, I guess this is the opposite of prefacing. With what I just said with, I'm not in the industry, so this is just me guessing. Go get one of those industry professionals. Mount SAC has a number of them. We've got a whole film department, and so really good film department too. And Richard Strand is great in playwriting, so he'll probably tell you who to go to in filmmaking. I don't know the filmmaking people. I just know that they're really good. Okay, so what kind of questions do you have about publishing?
Did you want me to share my stuff, John?
Yeah, please. This will
Okay.
be your first contact.
So as John said, it's really good to have contacts, and I can be one of your contacts, but apparently I closed my website. I don't know why I did that. There we go. All right. So like John said in the beginning, I have a literary magazine that is open for submissions until the 31st. The theme is social distancing, but the theme really is just anything you've written during this time to just help you stay sane and deal with being alone. Also, you can find more, and I'll make sure to share all this information in the links. You can find more information. Freaking Zoom. You can find more information on my website, which is Literary Alchemy Press, of how to submit and what my rules are. So that will be under the poetry and fiction zine. You can just click on that and it'll be right there. But yeah, so if you have any more questions, you can always just contact me through Facebook or email me. The way you submit to my magazine is through this email. And yeah.
Okay, and I want to answer Alessandra's question. I'm looking to publish a haiku tanka poetry collection illustrated with photography. A lot of publishers I found through Poets and Writers do not encourage illustration. Where can I find publishers who are willing to publish phrastic poems, specifically a chapbook size?
Oh, I'm one of them.
Here's what I would contact her. I would probably, if you didn't have her, I would start by trying to publish the individual pieces in magazines who are willing to take photography. Now, a lot of the reason that people don't do illustrations with haiku or don't allow the writer to also be the illustrator is often, not always, most of the time, the absolute worst illustrator for their work is the author themselves, even when they're good illustrators, even when they have, it's hard to emotionally make that break. But that's not to say that doesn't happen. I've worked with Choya Needles Press, who does that specifically, and the Rich Seuss. He by the way, has been at Culturama, so you can say that that's a contact. Rich Seuss is a great contact. Say, I was at Culturama and I met you, and I know that you do this kind of work. If he tells you no, he'll tell you why, and he'll give you directions to go forth. Francesca Terzano is also a fantastic contact for that.
Yeah, the only chapbook I've published so far was a collection by Katie Silverley, and it also included illustrations from it to help explain her poetry. So I'm very much open to publishing chapbooks that also have art in it, also because I was raised by an artist.
And you can, I would take a look at those magazines that allow you to do as well, just to expand. And magazines are always looking for artists. They're more interested in visual artists than poets, because so visual artists don't really, most of them don't really see magazines as a way of publishing, so they don't have as much information they don't have as much content as they might have had. So I would definitely send your stuff out to those, and I can help you with that. And actually, my wife could probably give you more help with that. My wife's a former publisher, and she's a visual artist, so she's got her finger on the pulse. I just volunteered her for work. I shouldn't have done that. Okay, but she's sitting right here, so it won't be a surprise to her. And Lynette, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, John, for all this really great information. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
So I had a question about, so I was in your class where you were like expanding on all this essentially on how to get us published. And one of the things you really encouraged us to do is to do book reviews and have that be like, you know, getting our foot in the door. And I was wondering how recent or how old is too old when you're trying to review something like, that's something I've been thinking about. And then
Absolutely.
my second question is, when you post, let's say you have a blog or something like it or a website, should you not publish your poems if you're trying to send them out there? Like, does that count as being published? Does it hurt you in any way?
Yeah, so you've asked more questions than you know, and so that's good. And I meant to talk about book reviews. It's a really good idea to write book reviews for a number of reasons. One is you're engaging in a community. You should be actively engaged in that community. I try to publish at least 20 book reviews a year, and sometimes it's more like 50. I do them mostly through a magazine called Cultural Weekly, but also I use that as a way of getting into venues that I've always wanted to get into, because too few people are writing book reviews. And so I wanted to get into Whale Road, so I reviewed Matt Cedillo's book for Whale Road, and it's coming out this month. Yay! I'm excited about that because that's just a magazine I've always wanted to be in. And so now I'm going to start contacting them with my poetry because they know who I am, and I can write a hell of a good book review. I'm really good at it. It's a really great way to get your foot in the door. Now, how recent should they be? They should be most of the time within the last year, something like that. If you're doing really professional stuff, you'll get it before it comes out, and sometimes I do that too. And so that it helps the book because it comes out right directly at the same time. But I try to do stuff within my field within a year that's been published. Now I am going to write. I've decided I'm going to write a review for all of Kareem Tayar's books because I've been in my modern poetry class, and we've been talking about the complexity of joy when expressed through poetry. Most people think that joy is simple. The way he writes it, it's really complex. It's really, really beautiful. And I kind of want to do a career review of him. And so that I can do that. So his books might be 10 years old, but there's the way I'm approaching it, I think it's a kind of a new and interesting take. And I'll either do that with Cultural Weekly. I'll probably try to get into LA Review, which is not to be confused with LA Review of Books. Those are two different magazines. But they're really, that'd be a great thing. The last thing you asked about was a blog. If you have a blog and you publish something, it is published. So I would not do too much self-publishing. At least don't do it with your eyes closed. Know that's the end of it. You have now published your thing. Same goes with Facebook, right? Or Instagram. Instagram poetry is a thing, and it's a good thing. I think it's a really great movement. But no, that's the end. You've published now, and maybe you can get into a collection or something like that. And some Instagram poets do that, but most magazines won't want that simply because they're trying to break new ground. They're trying to do new things. There are a couple of magazines that do reprints. My favorite, I believe, is gone. Is Sarah's? Has she stopped publishing?
Oh, Sarah? I don't know. I was trying to see if she was still publishing, but she may have kind of taken a hiatus with
Yeah.
COVID and everything too.
Yeah, absolutely. She runs a great little magazine that only does reprints. Okay.
So there's a couple of questions in the chat if you want to further expand. The
Yeah,
questions
I've got
are,
one more thing I want to say about
sorry.
this. That's all right. And the last thing about blogs, there's a lot of, if you're going to write a blog, I think it's a good thing. I've had blogs a lot. Mostly it shouldn't be about writing. Most of us want to write about writing, but there's a lot out there, and it's hard to write more than 20, 30 articles about it. However, if you are obsessed with something else outside of writing, that's a very good thing to write about. So a lot of my poetry is going to be nature poetry. So if I do another blog, it's going to be hiking in California, right? And those people who are interested in hiking in California do that. And there's a small Venn diagram of people who like to hike and like to read poetry. They will know about me. That's great. Whatever it is that other people don't, I would go with that. So I'm thinking about like, I'm going to use examples here. Oh, like Jonathan, if you could do one about mental health, that would be the ideal blog for Jonathan, right? And those sorts of how do you do this compassionately? Right? That'd be great. And so thank you, Francesca. What are the questions?
So I don't know if you want to expand more on double dipping, about how some publishers don't let you submit stuff that's already been submitted, but with the exception of chapbooks. And then someone asked how many poems or short stories do publishers usually want at one per submission? And Lloyd kind of already answered the memoir question, but if you submitted memoirs separately in small pieces, can you then submit a full book to someone?
Yeah. And that's in fact encouraged. Now, double dipping between magazines, you're going to never want to do, right? So if I publish with Tom in Redshift, that's it for those poems until it comes to my chapbook or my full book, and then that's a good thing, right? They want most of those poems to be published. I like to have, when I publish a collection, I like to have all my poems published someplace else. And so that it's now I can send them a copy of my book and say, hey, look at this. My poem that was in your magazine is now in my book. And that's just more people reading it. That's more, they will encourage. They'll say, hey, look at what Brantingham did. Isn't that great? And so that's really encouraged. When you're submitting, usually watch they'll tell you within the rules, but most people want 3 to 5 poems to be submitted as once. I always do it as a thematic bundle, right? So it's not just random ones. They're somehow linked thematically. Not always, but usually. Or one story, right? And usually it's just one story. If you do flash, sometimes they'll ask for 3 or 4. But usually one story. The memoir pieces you can absolutely chop up into discrete pieces, and you might have to change it a little bit so people understand the context of it. So like if it's all dependent on the thing that came before it, then that's a little bit harder. But you can change it a little bit to make it a little bit less dependent people in there and understanding. I think that was all the questions. Were that all the questions?
Yep.
I did have a comment about self-publishing. Personally, I don't encourage it. But I noticed I was reading Rattle's submission requirements, and they say they don't consider self-publishing the blogs, message boards, or Facebook as publication for this purpose.
Okay.
So, you read their submission. I think it's best not to, if you have a ton of poems, and you don't mind putting them on Facebook and then submitting others, that's fine. Or put the poems that you've already had published on Facebook.
Yeah, I do that all the time, right?
Yeah.
The poems you've had published, right? Because it's just nice to share. I like people to read my poems.
Sometimes I just run a haiku and throw it on Facebook.
Daisy has a question.
Hi, I'm gonna take you back to writing. The other day you said something about words that travel down the throat and back to the mouth when you write. Can you please read that again? And if possible, can you add a couple more nuggets of writing wisdom?
Sure. As we were talking about this the other day when we were doing a different, it wasn't actually my thing, but it was, it's about creating emotion in your when you're writing. And when you're reading, you hear the sounds of the in your head, right? Words are designed to do more than convey information. Words, when spoken, convey emotion. So that if you scream cactus at your child, the child will react and then understand why he's reacting after he's done it, right? It's an emotional thing. Cactus is a word that's skunk, not a good word, right? Because it's not a good thing. The mouth is created, and the throat and the mouth is created to create different emotions, right? Down here is generally deep emotion. So deep-seated hatred, love, joy, these sorts of things. Think of the word love and all the aspects of love. Starts here and it works its way down to the back, throat, and then back up, and ends up here. And when you make fun of somebody for being in love, you naturally don't say, you're in love. You say, you're in love. You love him. Oh, you want to kiss him. Ooh, right? And you're making fun of somebody for having an actual emotion. You make fun of this deep emotion right here. You're exaggerating that. When we use words of contempt, words that are designed to make us have contempt for other people, think of the N word, think of the C word, think of the F word for homosexual people. We're going to say them at the top of the back of the throat, because the more you hit that, the more you start to feel contempt. The easier it is to see that person is not a human anymore. It's an awful thing to do. The C word is not a bad word. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a body part, right? What's bad about it is the amount of contempt we load into it because of the way we say it. It's a really, really disgusting thing. So this is the point of rhyme. This is the point of alliteration. We're choosing that emotion, and we're coming back to it again and again and again, right? Even when your line is buried, when your rhyme is buried, right? You can have an eternal rhyme, or you can have an jammed line. You're still coming back to it. It still has the same effect on it. That's why you can read a poem about a guy sending back food at a restaurant, and you're just laughing and laughing and laughing because he is Sam. I am. I will not eat green eggs with ham. I will not eat them in a. I can't even remember that. But you start smiling. It feels good. Why? There's nothing funny about that. It's like I don't want to eat this. But the way it bounces in your mouth, it triggers those happy centers, right? It's great to read to kids because it's triggering those happy centers. That's what that's why the rhyme, why the alliteration. Now, as you're choosing this, you often do not sit down and say, I wonder where that happy sound is. Well, let's start with that A sound. Let me construct a poem out of that. Although you can do that, and Michelson Knapp does do that. Most of the time you don't. But it is why we read poems out loud. It's like, there's something off about this. Why did I say she had great pulchritude? That doesn't seem right. Why don't I use the word beauty instead? Beauty has a better sound than pulchritude, right? Although they mean basically the same thing. That's why we don't use the word pulchritude very often. It just doesn't fit our language very well. And I think only Latin scholars and me, because I use it as an example, would ever use that word. Right? We're going to come back to those words, reading out. And as you're working out the rhymes, it's like, this rhyme just doesn't feel right. That's the reason it doesn't feel right. And you can start knowing this, you can start working towards this. Robert Pinsky writes about this well, if you want to read farther. And I can't remember the name of this book where he talks about this, but he's got a book that includes the conversation about this concept.
Grant Heyer also has a really great handout on it.
Oh, does he? Yeah. So if you contact Grant, let me write his name. He will send this to you. Grant's my writing partner and buddy. We went to MFA together, and he teaches at Laguna College of Arts and Design. So just look there and ask him for his handout. Tell him I sent you. He'll be happy to send it to you. Thank you. And so, but it also works in fiction too. You know, when you're reading fiction, each paragraph should be its own poem, and you go back and you revise it in that way. What is the music of this language? Is it working? What is the meter? Right? Is it iambic? In which case, it's the heartbeat. You can also have stress, unstressed, unstressed, in which you have a waltz. You know, and it will function that way as long as you keep going that way. You can have mostly stressed, and then even promote stresses, which what happens in Dulce et Decorum Est, and also in Robert Kennedy's speech. Ask not what you can do for your country, or what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for. I screwed that whole up, but it's almost entirely stressed, and it even promotes words to make them extra stressed. Oh yeah, Carol. Yes, absolutely. He's the inaugural poet laureate of the city of Anaheim. Yeah, absolutely. What other questions do you have? These could be very specific down to your specific poems. Yeah, Lynette,
I can ask questions all day. Okay,
please.
my my question is, how do you, I guess, like, what are some things we can look into to determine the tier of a magazine or a publication? Like, if we're like still exploring, how do I know, like, oh, this will never, my chances are so slim of ever getting published here, versus like, oh, this is an easy low hanging fruit. I mean, not that I'm at that level, but in a few years I might be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I don't think there's anything that is out of your reach. I think of my friend Elder, who didn't have a lot of publications, but he wrote something he thought would be right for Agni, and he got into Agni, which is like one of the top magazines out there. And I'm glad that he did, because he really has something to say. And I think you have something to say too. I think what you have to say, we need to hear. So go for those tier ones. But okay, so what are those things? You think about tier one, you're thinking about things on Barnes & Noble shelves, things like the New Yorker, the Paris Review, used to be Tin House, but they're gone now. Magazines like that, right? That if you're hanging out at Barnes & Noble, you will see. They kind of most of them have an Iowa Writers Workshop feel to them, if you know what I mean by that, or a New Yorker feel to them, that kind of thing. Not necessarily, some of them don't. But also magazines like Ellery Queen, which I adore, and Asimov magazine, which I also adore. These magazines would be tier one. In other words, they're nationally distributed. You get all sorts of attention for them. Crazy Horse. We have a friend who got into Crazy Horse, and a bunch of agents then solicited him. It's like, what novel do you have, right? That from the writer's career point of view is why you want to be in there, because these are just amazing opportunities for you. And then tier two, you're thinking about more sort of regional magazines that have a major impact in that region. So in this area, the Chiron Review, which I used to work for, it's very much a Long Beach magazine. People know it, and they'll know it outside of Long Beach as well. But everybody in Long Beach reads, and the surrounding cities of Long Beach are going to read Chiron Review. Boulevard kind of is a little bit tier one, a little bit tier two. In our area, in the Claremont area, Tahoma Literary Review is a really big one, and that's also in what do you call it, Washington, right? That's got a couple of areas, and it's kind of moving towards that tier one at this point. But these kinds of bigger magazines, a lot of magazines associated with universities. So I'd say the Missouri Review is definitely tier one, but say Confrontation from Long Beach, not Long Beach, Long Island University is tier two. And those are the journal is very well respected out of the Ohio State University. I don't know why I have to say it that way, but apparently you're supposed to. And I suppose it's the journal. And so, these kinds of magazines are tier. And then tier three are really passion projects for people. And they can be big, they can be small. So, for example, Mount Sac used to have one called Creepy Gnome. And I think it had three issues. Three issues, yeah. And it was great. It was fantastic. The reason we stopped doing it is because those students graduated. And the next students didn't really want to do it. They did a little bit, but they didn't have the same passion. That's usually what it's going to be. Rind is another magazine like this. And if you know Shema, a lot of you have seen Shema over these last few weeks. She was part of running that, and so is Owen Torres, but he hasn't been here at all. I'd say that Francesca's magazine is definitely that, right? Definitely a passion project. And so now that I've defined those things, how can you tell? Well, which is which? Well, it's usually that. You could they are identifying themselves as national, local, or passion, right? And so the New Yorker started off as a passion project, and it was all about recreating the emotion of being near Dorothy Parker, right? And so they intentionally kept themselves small for a very, very long time, and they would keep talking about Dorothy Parker and that Algonquin round table. And then they blew up. I can't remember what it was that made them blow. I think it might have been, wasn't Nixon, it was before that. It was something like that. and they just blew up and they decided to go down that direction. Or you can think of Choya Needles. The guy has a deep passion for the desert and for haiku. And so, okay, he does other things than that, but that's his real love. Like, okay, well that seems to me like a tier 3, maybe a tier 2, except for the town of Joshua Tree isn't big enough to really comprise a region. But that's how you're looking for it. Now, sometimes those tier 3 things are so perfect for what I'm doing that I just can't imagine publishing anywhere else, right? So I wrote a couple of stories about loquats, and then I'm looking around, there's a journal about loquats. Like, okay, that seems, I didn't think anybody else knew what a loquat is, but there's a whole journal, a literary journal about loquats. That sounds good to me. And so I entered into this thing. It's my favorite quat. It's so much better than the kumquat. If you've never had a loquat, you got to try one of these things. The seeds are annoying, but aside from that, they're delicious. Okay, so
John, did you answer the children's book question?
I have not. Are there any specific websites for publishing a children's book? I know, I'm sure there are. Duotrope would definitely do it, but that's one field I don't know very much about. I'm not interested in children's book writing, and that's a very, very specific thing too. I would start by talking to Tamara, and I don't know if she's going to want to talk to you, but you can reach out to her, Tamara Horton. She is a person who knows children's book publishing. We have somebody in the library who's on the board of that big children's book prize. So Mount Sac Library has one of those people. I can't remember her name, but Tamara will know. They're good friends. Don't diss kumquats. I didn't say kumquats were bad. I said they were inferior to the loquat, and both are better than, I'm not even going to make that joke because that's a bad joke.
And then the other question is something that you do know. Where can they publish flash memoir or nonfiction?
You know what? Yeah, flash fiction is my thing. I am obsessed with flash fiction. What I didn't tell you was one more piece of advice. I belong to the International Flash Fiction Society on Facebook. It's international because they now allow Americans on there, but it's a British thing, and they're fantastic. They're so good. I absolutely love, and they will put a whole bunch of stuff on there. I also follow some people. One of my old students named Kevin Ridgway, I'll follow him, and he'll put up, here's why I published this. Oh, that's great. He always makes good choices. You can, in Duotrope, you can also do targeted things for flash fiction. Flash fiction is becoming such a big thing. It's becoming easier and easier to know where to send the stuff to. But this is a really good, I do too. This is a really, really good way to publish. Contact me because I am always thinking about publishing flash fiction. Let's see. Okay, there's a bunch of other questions in here. Oh, thank you, Pearson, put up Tamara Hortons. Maybe not everybody inundate her at once, or she'll be angry with me. Shelley.
I wrote a paper for your class, an essay that was supposed to be academic on Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Turned out to be more of a creative writing paper, and you publish it. I don't know where that would be appropriate to.
I would probably, I'll help you with that. I'd take a look at some of the stuff where Clifton Snyder published. He published a book called The Beatle Bump, and it was all about writing about the Beatles. And I think anywhere he published something about the Beatles, Gil Scott Heron, they'd also be interested in Gil Scott Heron's work as well, or work about it. By the way, if you have never listened to The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, do so. It was done in the 70s, and it's about right now. He's predicting this moment. It's fantastic. Okay, so yeah, I would do that. And, I've been meaning to work with you on this. Let's work this week on this. Okay. We'll get that out there. I think they'd be interested. Any place that is interested in, I probably wouldn't go with a hip hop magazine because it's it's so old. I would go with somebody who's looking at things from the 70s and maybe some hippie-ish kinds of things. Maybe Berkeley. God, what's that one out of Berkeley? It's the Berkeley Literary Journal, I think it is. And I'd take a look at that. They'd be interested in that. I'm trying. I think there'll probably be a couple of online magazines that'll do it. None of the ones that I'm working with now, but we could find somebody who's doing that kind of thing. There might even be a Gil Scott Heron specific magazine that happens every once in a while. Like that happened for a while with Tolkien. There were all sorts of Tolkien magazines out there, but you know, there could be something for him. Also, some of those clubs in downtown New York that specialize in spoken word poetry that might be a place to look. Oh, thank you, Tom.
John,
Okay.
just to clarify, the flash question was actually about flash memoir.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a flash memoir. I think anybody who took flash fiction would also be interested in flash memoir.
Oh, okay.
So just to say this is memoir. Was that you, Linda? Are you the flash memoir writer? There. Okay. I think I have time for one more question. Yeah. And I love Flash. Flash is the way as far as I'm concerned.
Can you tell me what is Flash?
If you're in the United States, it's fewer than 1,000 words. If you're in England, it's fewer than 500. Anywhere that involves that. So the famous Flash piece ascribed to Hemingway, which probably wasn't Hemingway, is "For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn," and that's a really profoundly deep story, right? But what the effect of that is, you do most of the construction of the story in your head as opposed to it being on the page. The reader's doing more of the work than the writer is. Here's another one. The Archangel Gabriel came to Joseph and said, "Beware, for it is foretold that when you speak the word Doyen, you shall die." Doyen, he asked, and thus he died. Right. So you've got a little piece about irony, a piece about, you know. Okay. Wow, you've been writing since the mid-90s. That's great. I don't know if you had, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Hezekiah. I used to write flash in the 90s, and I would send it out, and the publishers would say, "What, you only gave us the first page," or "What is this?" or, you know, that kind of thing. And now it's accepted and loved. So I feel like I was cutting edge there for a while. I was also cutting edge because I got AOL and you know, had dial-up, but it's I had a Saturn. I was very cool.
Yeah, it was an online group turned into a Yahoo group that at one point that was for flash fiction in particular, but yes, working with flash since the 90s.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. Andrew asks, if you have something a little over 1,000 words, would you choose to cut it to fit flash? No. If those 1,000 words were perfect, I'd keep them where they are. And I would just submit it someplace else. Or maybe say, to give it to a flash fiction piece, but I'm not going to ruin the piece. Now, if it doesn't ruin the piece, then those words should have been out anyway. So, right. Yeah. Okay, well, we've reached the end of our time. I'll be hanging out here for a little while if you want to talk, but otherwise, I'll see you later. Keep in touch. We're going to be doing more and more and more Culturama. Very excited. The future looks really great.